Hello and welcome. Every generation is offered a challenge, and with such challenges come opportunities. The challenge confronting our generation and our continent at this point in time, might not be the struggle for political freedom or independence, as it used to be some decades back, probably in the 60s thereabout. Today, as a continent, our generation is charged with building an integrated, inclusive, and economically robust single continental market that allows every African to trade across borders freely without impediment. In what promises to be Africa's second continental emancipation poses a struggle for independence. This is why we gladly welcome you, Africa and the world, to our maiden episode of the AfCFTA Podcast, where we don't only talk policy, we talk change and the development of the African continent. Today, we are starting with a conviction and a vision for 1.4 billion people who are no longer waiting for the future because we are building this future ourselves at no other time but now. With us is a man who knows this vision intimately. He has been at the very center of Africa's biggest economic renaissance since its inception. We are privileged to take off our maiden edition of our podcast conversation with the Secretary General of the AfCFTA Secretariat, His Excellency Wamkele Mene. Your Excellency, welcome to the AfCFTA Podcast.
Thank you very much.
A lot of people would say that, we've been waiting for this for quite a long time now. What do you make of a platform of this nature? And to what extent do you think that it can influence the economic integration that as a continent we're seeking?
Well, I think that, as you said in your introductory remarks, that the current phase that we are in is the last opportunity that we have to really turn the page on the economic development of our continent. The other struggles, as you mentioned, where we prevailed, pushing back colonialists, defeating apartheid. But this is really a new site of struggle of integration to enable people to transit without a visa across borders, to transit their goods across borders, their services, a truly integrated market. This is the new challenge, the new phase of a struggle that we have got to confront. And since 2020, we have begun, the year 2020, we have begun in earnest to confront this challenge. We've had some successes, of course. We've had some setbacks. But I think that we've made a very good start. Some would argue that we are 60, 70 years too late. Nonetheless, we are where we are. So we have to accelerate the pace of integration of our continent, particularly in light of the global context.
And I recall that I think about 3-4 years there about the AU General Assembly. The Prime Minister of Ethiopia mentioned the fact that the continent needs a voice that would trumpet what we are seeking to achieve as a continent. And you look around the world, it does appear that other continents haven't been slow at this. They've ensured that they have certain mediums that trumpets their voice. Today, as important as this organ is to the African Union and to the continent, you have a platform that sort of going to give voice to what's been going on. Do you think that this is the kind of voice that the continent is waiting for us to tell our own stories? This is the kind of platforms for us to tell our own stories?
Yes, absolutely. You know what is remarkable about the AfCFTA is that we negotiated it ourselves. Nobody came from outside and said, here, sign on the dotted line. As we've seen with other arrangements in the past, the Economic Partnership Agreement, for example, we didn't negotiate it as Africans. It was preconceived in Brussels, and it was then brought to us, a tweak here and there, but largely, by and large, it was not a negotiated economic agreement. This is different because it is organically African. We negotiated this agreement ourselves. We know the limitations that it has, and we know some of the innovations that we developed in the agreement. So I think that that is why you will hear every head of state mentioning it, because it is something that is organic to Africa, that we developed ourselves under the leadership of our heads of states. And that's why all of them speak about it and to it as really the blueprint for integration of our continent. So it is a remarkable journey that we've taken over the last 10 years, because the negotiations started in 2015. So we moved much faster in the last 5 years. Even in the middle of COVID, we were moving relatively fast. So I think we should really celebrate the achievement, but mindful of the challenges that lie ahead. Yeah.
Now, like I said earlier, you are widely admired across the continent for the passion that you and the commitment that you bring to the table, particularly when it comes to this agreement. I have served on quite a number of platforms, and when I had the chance at the UN headquarters in 2022, mentioned it to the UN Secretary General and everybody else, the extent and the passion that you put to this work. What drew you closer to this AfCFTA and the passion that you drive this agenda with?
Well, I don't want our continent to be poor forever. And I don't want my children and my children's children to be in conditions of underdevelopment. And so the commitment and the drive to get this done comes from that we should not have a situation that sustains where over the last 60 years our continent was the poorest in the world. That should not happen anymore. And if you look at how Europe, after the Second World War, how Europe rapidly developed, and some parts of Asia, it was really through economic development, and economic growth that was driven by trade, what economists refer to as export-led growth, which significantly contributed to whether we're talking about in China, in South Korea, in Singapore, and even in the European Union, the present-day European Union. What we saw is a combination of market reforms, as well, of course, as sustained investments in industrial development and so on, but combining that with an ambition for an integrated market. If you look at China as a domestic economy, as a domestic market, similarly situated in terms of population to the continent of Africa, the Chinese have built a domestic market where they really don't need anybody else. They can sustain themselves as an economy on their own.
I see.
We have the capability as a continent of Africa to be a large domestic market that is able to be self-sufficient without disconnecting from the rest of the world. For me, this is not just something that keeps me occupied during the day. It is absolutely a mission that all of us, whether you are in the private sector, the public sector, civil society, the upliftment of our continent, the economic upliftment of our continent must be for all of us. From your own vantage point or your own mandate, it must be a commitment for all of us. I don't want to live in the US, in Europe, wherever. I want to live in Africa. And therefore I cannot go to the US to improve the US.
You have to
I
improve
have to
Africa
improve
yourself.
the continent of Africa. So that is why I approach this with so much commitment.
And it appears that you've been at the thick of things from the beginning, from the inception, the negotiation stages and all of that. If you recall some of the toughest moment, some of the instances that a lot of us are not privy to, because I'm sure that a lot of things took place at the initial stages. Share with us.
The very first meeting that I attended, which was intended to develop an action plan, a roadmap for integration on the continent, was here in Accra.
I see.
In Labadi Beach in 2010. And we did develop that roadmap, and we said to our, made a recommendation to our ministers that we want Africa to be a free trade area by the year 2018. We missed that deadline, of course, by a few years, but that was really a turning point for me, because it marked the beginning of the journey. It took 5 years before we actually started the negotiations. We started the negotiations in 2015 and moved rapidly relative to how trade negotiations move. We moved very, very fast. Some of the key moments for me was when Nigeria was the chair of the ministers. There was a gentleman, he passed away, Ambassador Chiedu Osakwe, really the big vision behind the legal architecture of the AfCFTA. And he led that process for about a year and a half, until he regrettably passed away. What I realized at the very beginning of the negotiations is how entrenched fragmentation is in our continent.
I see.
And how difficult it is going to be to overcome that fragmentation. You know, there used to be, in the negotiations at the beginning, delegates would caucus between sessions based on language, not based on interests, on economic interests, but
That's
based on which region of the continent they come from. So the Anglophones would caucus, the Francophones, and of course the smallest number would be the Lusophones.
Regardless of their position ideologically.
Regardless of the position of the country on the issue, regardless of the economic interest that they had on the issue. So this really made me very, very worried about how things were going, and I must say it was not a high point for us. These divisions, of course, then they filtered into really how you negotiate and come up with consensus. I remember we were in Senegal in 2018 or maybe 2019, and the discussion was about the entry into force of the agreement. Those who spoke French were saying entry into force must be 15 countries. The rest of the meeting was saying, no, the threshold must be 22 countries, which is what legally the threshold usually is. But it was clear that that was also a language-driven negotiating position,
sort of.
which was unfortunate. The good news is this, that all of that is now in the past. What I've seen, what I continue to see, is more and more a realization that actually all of us are in this together. Whether you are a big economy or a small economy, all of us have an interest in this. And it doesn't matter whether you are in Central Africa or in West Africa or North Africa. We are all confronting the same challenge. So it took some time for us to develop the trust and to overcome some of these artificial divisions that existed for the last 70 years. As I say, these were not high points in the process. I don't remember these moments fondly. But the good news, as I say, is that we did overcome those challenges, and we did create an environment where all countries, big and small, felt that their interests can be accommodated.
Yeah.
Because in a negotiation, your weakness is my strength, and so you have to negotiate an agreement in such a way that that is not expressed either legally or economically, that everybody, all countries, do see the benefits. So whilst in ordinary circumstances in a negotiation, your weakness is my strength, we took a different view in the text, because if you look at it, it has very, very strong dimensions of development, of special and differential treatment for countries that are landlocked, that are least developed. All of these flexibilities are built into the agreement so that nobody comes out as a loser.
And was there a particular moment that you realized that aha moment, that we are here, the dream is now becoming a reality to have a continental market? And you in particular, beyond the aha moment, did you feel a certain political weight on you when you realized that you were going to be the driver for this whole vision for the continent?
The aha moment for me was in Kigali when the agreement was signed by 43 heads of states. That was really a turning point, because the whole world, literally the whole world, on BBC, on CNN, CNBC Africa, Al Jazeera, it was the day of the signing was a remarkable moment, because the continent of Africa demonstrated seriousness and commitment. We had been in Rwanda for 3 weeks leading up to that day of signature on the 21st of March 2018, and we had late negotiating sessions until late into the night. So I didn't go to the signing. I was not in the room for the signing. I was sleeping because we hadn't slept in about 3 weeks. So I was not
all
in
negotiating, all
yes,
coming to. I see.
Yes. I was not in the room. I woke up, I think, around 11 in the morning, because we finished the night before at 3 a.m. So I switched on the television and I saw on CNN, on BBC, on Al Jazeera. That was a very big moment. A very, very big moment.
The global eyes was on Africa.
Yes, but unfortunately not. Nobody was saying that this is a turning point. All of them were saying, yes, we see what is about to happen in Rwanda, but they are not going to implement it. Africans don't have a history of living up to their own commitments that they make to themselves. So let's watch and see. Somebody said, well, it won't even be ratified. It won't enter into force. So there were all of these negative voices, but we have proven them wrong. We've proven them wrong because the agreement entered into force, and not only did it enter into force, it is being implemented. So I think that the day on which the agreement was signed was really, for me, a turning point. I didn't know at that time in 2018 that I was going to be elected, because at that point there was no discussion about a secretariat. It was just to get the agreement
in place.
So I don't think anybody knew that there was going to be an entire infrastructure which is established to ensure
the implementation.
Of course, it was quite a sensible thing to do, that the heads of states decided there must be a secretariat, because you have to have the day-to-day hands-on drive the implementation. Otherwise, it's not going to succeed.
Yeah. And the Secretariat is now an organ of the Africa Union. I'm sure that, so the African Union is supporting, and I'm sure that the African Union has been driving this all throughout. But beyond the African Union itself, I'm sure that there are quite a number of other organizations that are supported with this. I'm thinking that the regional economic communities, for instance, have been in the thick of things. Would you be able to share some of the organizations that from day one have stuck with this vision all throughout?
We had very strong support from the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. We had very strong support from UNECA, even before the current Executive Secretary, Ambassador Gatete. Before that, we had Madam ES, who was also a very strong supporter. So these, and then of course we had academia on the continent. We had institutions such as TRALAC in South Africa, TRAPCA in Tanzania. These were institutions that supported the vision from the beginning. And then there were the development finance institutions. So, for example, African Development Bank, President Adesina, they were the very first ones to make funding available. Afrexim Bank also. These were the critical intervention measures that were required to get this to get off the ground. COMESA, SADC, and the East African community. You mentioned regional economic communities. At that time, we were still negotiating what we called the tripartite FTA, which was SADC, COMESA, and EAC. And so the AfCFTA really was born out of that trilateral negotiation between these three regions. Then you had the AfCFTA that brought in ECOWAS, ECAS, CIMAC, and so on. So it was truly a continental effort. But, you know, a lot of people don't realize that there is nothing in the African Union that moves without the support of the heads of states. And I would say that the primary drivers of the AfCFTA have been our heads of states.
Good.
When President Kagame was the chairperson of the African Union, that's when we signed in Kigali. He was personally invested in it and personally driving the agenda of the African Union towards economic integration. So I think that, of course, there were other heads of states that contributed, but the Assembly of Heads of States is really the main engine for where we are today.
And I noticed that the current champion as well has been in the thick of things from day one.
Yes, President Isufu.
President Isufu
was from 2017 appointed as the champion for the AfCFTA, and that really made a very big difference. And by the way, again, a lot of people may not be aware, but President Mahama also, in his first term.
I see.
President Mahama in his first term was in the what was referred to as the high-level technical committee. High-level technical committee, which comprised 5 heads of states, to move forward on the agenda of, at that time it was still called the Continental Free Trade Area. So President Mahama was involved also from the very beginning.
That's interesting.
And so now that
he's back as president.
He's back as president. You know, I presume, I don't know for a fact, I presume that it is a matter of gratification that he sees that that this has moved, and not only has it progressed, but it is now in Ghana.
Yeah, and one of the things since your election by the Assembly of Heads of States, I know personally I have seen the launch of the Pan-African Payment and Settlement Systems. For instance, I know that quite a number of the protocols have been concluded. The Adjustment Fund is another that the instruments, one of the instruments that I have seen also concluded. What would you say are the landmark interventions that the AfCFTA has been able to bring to the table in terms of integrating the continent's market so far?
The first realization when I was, after my first election, was that we had to transcend just a trade agreement, which was fascinating for trade lawyers and economists. But if you are not a trade lawyer or an economist, it ceases to be fascinating from a legal drafting point of view. It's got to be implemented.
Yeah.
And one of the mistakes that I observed very early on in my career is that we negotiate trade agreements and then we move on. Ministries of Trade negotiate and then you move on to the next trade negotiation. So I sought to learn from that observation and looked for partners that would help us to design tools that will implement the agreement. So let's take, for example, the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. We have 42 currencies in Africa. The cost of currency convertibility is about $5 billion annually. If you are in Ghana, you want to trade with somebody in Kenya, you have to buy a third currency.
Yeah.
This is, forget about for a minute about the other fragmentation factors that impact on trade in Africa. But the cost of money is one of the main reasons why we see trade not as high as it should be. And the reliance on third currencies for intra-Africa trade, big constraint. When you are in Europe, you don't trade, Belgium and France don't trade using the dollar. They trade using the euro. That's their local currency. They don't have to buy a third currency. It's something as simple as that makes a $5 billion difference. So the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, in my opinion, is a very transformative tool for implementation of the AfCFTA. Second, the AfCFTA Adjustment Fund, where we have already raised $1 billion. We will raise up to $10 billion. Again, also a transformative tool for enabling us to make interventions to support industrial development and the implementation of the AfCFTA. This is a remarkable intervention.
Yeah.
The third tool that we're working on is what we will refer to as the AfCFTA Transit Guarantee Scheme. As we speak today, if you are transiting your goods, let's say from Nigeria, from Lagos into Cameroon, and from Cameroon onto the Central African Republic, Central Africa, you have to have a separate insurance for each country. And that is costly. We are now designing a product that will enable you to have only one, what we call it, a transit guarantee bond. Only one transit guarantee bond to transit throughout
the continent.
Throughout the continent.
I see.
These are the tools that enable trade to be meaningful in people's lives by ensuring that it is cost effective to trade within Africa. So that's where I think the difference is that these tools are intended to ensure that we certainly see the impact of the AfCFTA.
Yeah, and you talk about meaningful trade. So one of the things that again I observed as some of the efforts that the Secretariat was making to ensure that the continent embraces this and the implementation becomes a lot more practical, to have a commercially meaningful trading on the continent is what you launched as a guided trade initiative.
Yeah.
And that was supposed to guide sort of practically the pilot projects of the AfCFTA. Would you share with us what the Secretariat was able to achieve with this, and to what extent did the continent embrace this, party states of the AfCFTA in particular?
There had never been, before the Guided Trade Initiative, there had never been a trade between ECOWAS and the East African Community. It had never happened before.
It had been within the region, say
It was
within ECOWAS, within SADC separately.
Yes. And where that trade was happening between ECOWAS and the East African Community, it was based on WTO rules. So this in and of itself was unprecedented. And it was about 2 years after the AfCFTA had been operationalized. And so we needed a proof of concept that actually what has been drafted and what obtains at law is possible, and that it is achievable in practice. So this was the idea of the Guided Trade Initiative. We started with 7 countries, and the trade happened under the rules of the AfCFTA. Today, as we speak, there are 24 countries that are trading under the AfCFTA out of 49. So we moved from 7 in 2022 to 24 in 2025. Certificates of origin are being issued by various countries, which means that the trade is happening. The observations, the lessons learned are, first, the cost of infrastructure continues to prohibit the full realization of trade in Africa, the cost of transport and logistics, the continued fragmentation in customs systems, administration. These are some of the lessons that we learned. Some of them we knew, of course. Others were revelations. But the fundamental objective of the exercise, which was to test whether or not these rules that we've negotiated, do they work? And do they support commercially meaningful trade in a way that that the private sector can take advantage of the market? And the answer to that question is a resounding yes. But with these observations that I've just mentioned, logistics, infrastructure, and so on.
And one would question that at what point does the private sector take over from the government-led or the institutional-led guided trade? Do you see that the private sector has learnt from the guided trade initiative and willing to take over the commercially meaningful trading under the AfCFTA?
I think the private sector is beginning to realize that there are opportunities through the AfCFTA. The AfCFTA can be a vehicle for them to pursue opportunities in other regions of the continent. Just last year, 2024, intra-Africa trade was at $220 billion, which was an increase of about 12% from the previous year. So this demonstrates to me that that the private sector does see the value of a continental market. The largest economy in Africa, Nigeria, just last month issued a report that for Nigeria's largest export destination is no longer Europe or China or wherever else. That as of 2024, it is now the African continent because of the AfCFTA. So I think, and all of this is private sector. It's not governments. All of this is being driven by the private sector. Of course, it is early days. More needs to be done. But I think that we certainly are on the right track, and we learned all of these lessons from the Guided Trade Initiative.
Yeah, and beyond the initial protocols that you mentioned that the Secretariat engaged on, we noticed that you are now very strong on digital trade.
Yeah.
You are very strong on intellectual property as well. What's driving this? Why?
Digital trade, Africa's digital economy by 2035 is estimated to be at about $700 billion. That is quite a significant share of Africa's economy. However, if we do not, again, going back to the point I made earlier, if we do not have specific interventions, tools that enable that economy to continue to grow, it will remain nothing but a projection.
Yeah.
So the protocol on digital trade is the tool that we want to harness this projection of a digital economy with it. So, for example, investing in digital public infrastructure, enabling movement of data across our continent, all of these digital literacy, digital payments, digital inclusion of SMEs, these are very, very important aspects of Africa's digital economy that are embedded in the protocol on digital trade. So if we don't accelerate the movement of Africa's economy towards digitization, we will not reap the full benefits of the economy that is ahead of us. So we have placed the digital economy as a priority that transcends all of the AfCFTA's protocols. Even if you are talking about customs as a digital economy component, trade in goods, all the separate elements, they have an aspect of the digital economy. So we are very, very confident that this focus will yield the results that we want to see. Similarly, with intellectual property rights, we have to protect our artists, copyrights, trademarks. We've got to enable a continental market for them, and legal protections that will be continental for them, so that if you are an artist in Ghana, you don't enjoy your protections of your copyrights only in Ghana or ECOWAS, but that also in Central Africa, East Africa, and so on. And then more importantly, of course, from the point of view of intellectual property rights, to drive industrial development and innovation through intellectual property rights. So these are very important aspects of our work.
Now connecting the AfCFTA, though an African continental agreement, to the global, what's happening globally. A lot is going on globally. We are seeking to match up as a continent. How do you think the AfCFTA is shaped by global trade policies, global trade programs, and some of the trade protectionism that we are encountering globally? And is the AfCFTA robust enough to withstand and stand on its own in the midst of all these things, or the global arrangements that are going on?
There certainly are externalities, as you are mentioning, that have an impact on the AfCFTA. On the face of it, the impact is negative.
Okay.
But I think in the long term, this is the stress test that we need, the stress test as to the robustness of the legal architecture that we've designed. There are political economy questions, of course, that are outside of the legal architecture, and these political economy questions relate to individual countries making assessments as to what is it that is in their best interest vis-a-vis, let's say, what the United States, its measures, what measures they are introducing. So, of course, these are factors that are outside of our control. I do believe that the the current global trade policy trends and the impact that they have on the AfCFTA actually are helpful to us because what is becoming increasingly clear is that the African continent, we are on our own. And so we have got to make this domestic market, we have to make it work because we cannot rely on the US as an export market anymore. That's clear. A tariff of 53% on a country like Lesotho, it means that the US is saying we're not interested. So we've got to build our own domestic market. And in so doing, I believe the tools that we need are embedded, are already there. Of course, it's going to take time, but I believe we will get there. So the global context the outlook is very gloomy. Increased trade protectionism, increased investment protectionism, increased industrial development protectionism. The opposite is true for the African continent. We are moving in the direction of intra-Africa liberalization, and that is good for our economy.
And we've done about 5 years since the implementation of the AfCFTA. What would you say are the current priorities that the Secretariat is setting for the implementation of the AfCFTA? What do you see for the next, say, 5 or 10 years as being the priorities of the AfCFTA Secretariat, given the background of some of these global arrangements that are going on?
We have to continue to work with our development finance institutions for them to invest more in trade supporting infrastructure. We have to continue to increase the numbers of countries that are trading in earnest under the AfCFTA. I mentioned today we are at 24, so we need to, over the next 5 years, we should aim that all 49 state parties, that all of them have gazetted the AfCFTA and that they are trading under the rules of the AfCFTA. This has got to be, in my opinion, the immediate task over the next 5 years. Infrastructure is key. It is absolutely critical to enhanced volumes of trade. Transport and logistics is key to enhanced volumes of transit of goods. The digital economy and the digital infrastructure is absolutely key for the services sector. So we over the next 5 years we have challenges, but we also have opportunities.
Yeah. And how do you assess the readiness of the party states that you talk about? You mentioned earlier that the political will has been there from the beginning, but going forward, how do you assess the political will and the readiness of the party states in carrying on these priorities?
The political will is I don't think that's going to change. It will remain for a long time, which is important. But of course, the political will has got to be translated into action. We have to act on our ambitions, and that's where this issue of moving from 23 countries that are trading to 49 countries, that's where the translation from political will to action is going to be required. But I am very optimistic about the direction. I think that in the next 5 years, we will see more and more countries, if not the entire 49, we will see more, quite a significant number that are taking advantage of the AfCFTA by gazetting and trading under the rules.
Yeah, we know that yourself and your team at the Secretariat have been doing remarkably well. Do you know all the work that's to ensure the implementation of this major agenda? But of course, I believe that you do this with strategic partnerships, partners who have helped you along the line.
Yeah.
Who are some of these interesting partners?
Well, AfCFTA Bank has been a remarkable source of support for us and for me personally. African Development Bank, Africa Finance Corporation, TDB. These are the institutions that really are key. You can eliminate intra-Africa barriers to trade and investment, but if you don't see trade finance, if you don't see investment in industrial development, you will not succeed in a trade agreement.
Yeah.
And so these have been absolutely vital partners for us to succeed in what we are doing.
Yeah. And what would you consider, as you talk about succeeding, let's say by the next 20, 30, by the next 5 or 7 years from now, what would you personally consider as a success story of the AfCFTA?
A trade, there's a temptation to measure a trade and AfCFTA in particular in terms of trade volumes. How much trade in terms of percentage is taking place? Have we moved from 18 to 25? But really, for me, the real measure is the impact on small medium enterprises, on young people, the impact that the difference that this makes in their lives.
Yeah.
So if you are able to you are a manufacturer in Nigeria or in Togo, and you now have a new market access in Kenya or Uganda in East Africa, that is a measure of success for me. And vice versa, if you are smallholder farmers in Kenya and you are now able to export your tea to Ghana as a smallholder farmer, that is, for me, the measure of success. So inclusion, in other words, inclusion in a manner that everybody takes ownership of our own destiny as a continent, what I mentioned at the very beginning. That is really, for me, the measure of success.
Yeah. And so if a young entrepreneur is watching us at the moment, and quite a number of them have taken interest in the AfCFTA, what vision would you want them to hold of the AfCFTA? And what would you tell a young entrepreneur, an SME who is watching you at the moment with so much enthusiasm to embrace this AfCFTA?
We have introduced platforms for entrepreneurs, young people to engage. We have the Youth Symposium, AfCFTA Youth Symposium. We have the AfCFTA Biashara Africa, or Business Forum. We have the Intra-Africa Trade Fair coming up in 2 weeks' time in Algeria. All of these platforms are intended to enable young people to take advantage of the AfCFTA, and including the digital tools that we have introduced, such as the Africa Trade Gateway. All of these are the objective is to make sure that if you are a young entrepreneur, you are able to access the market where you want to go. And you can do so either physically by going to that market, or indeed by leveraging on the digital tools that I mentioned to access that market. Of course, I don't for a moment suggest that it is all very, very easy, but an entrepreneur, by definition, must take risks. And so we support you in that journey by deploying all of these tools to enable you as a youthful entrepreneur to succeed.
Yeah. Your Excellency, as we conclude our interview, let's get on your lighter side a little bit and probably get on the personal side a little bit. Because as I said from the beginning, and personally, I have seen the intensity to which you approach this job. I also know that you're a father. Father of how many?
2 boys.
2 boys.
2 boys.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And what would you say fatherhood, for instance, has taught you? In terms of the legacy you seek to leave, and the passion that you seek to work with, and all of that, what has fatherhood taught you?
The younger one is too young to understand what we are doing. He's 18 months old. My eldest son is 8. He has an understanding of what we are trying to do, and
That's impressive.
he does
Yes,
understand
yes.
that most of the time I'm not home because I have to work,
Build a future.
because
for the
we have
continent.
to. He actually uses the phrase, we have to trade with one another as a continent. So he understands that this is the mission that we have, and he does cut me some slack for not being home a lot of the times. So I think my family is very, very supportive of because we all know what is at stake. As I mentioned, I don't want to live in Europe. I don't want to live in China. I don't want to live in the US. I want to live in Africa. And so all of us in my family understand that in order for us to have a bright future, all Africans, we must make a contribution. And there must be a sacrifice that we make along the way. And so I'm very fortunate that my family is very, very supportive. My wife and my 2 boys, my son who's 8. When we came to Ghana, he was 3.5.
Okay.
So all he knows really is Accra, and all he knows is us in this job, in this mission,
Yeah.
and in this journey. And so he has grown up with that, and he understands it fully. The obligations and the duty that we are honored to have. To be in the leadership at this very, very critical time.
And I dug you up a little bit and realized that you've had some soft spot for sports.
Yes.
You've been involved in sports before?
I
And how
had
seriously?
Well, I had illusions of being a professional athlete.
I see.
When I was at university, I was on a full athletic scholarship. I used to run track.
Awesome. I see.
And then I messed up my knees, and so I had to give up on that on
That
that
ambition.
illusion of being a
I see.
professional athlete. So it is now, unfortunately, I'm not able to, because my knees gave up a long time ago. I had something that they call runner's knee, which you have to take some kind of medication for it. But I was a very, very committed track and field athlete.
Did you get any medals though?
I did.
Oh,
I
you
competed
did.
nationally. I was in the national South African team. I was in the team for my province.
Beautiful.
So I was competitive enough, but not competitive enough to make a living out of it as a professional athlete.
But I'm sure that, and maybe I would want to find out from you, do you see that your sporting life from that early stages that had played a role in your current stamina that you approach your work with, and the sort of ethics that it's also imbibed in you, very disciplined, committed to time and everything? Has it played a certain role in your life?
I think that for any young person, sports does indeed build a sense of discipline, because you have to train 6 days a week. You have to be at training twice a day, specific times. You have to follow a very, very strict regimen. So it does indeed help you to build a sense of discipline, because if you are not disciplined as an athlete, you will not succeed. Discipline is the key factor to succeeding as an athlete. So it helped to build my sense of discipline, to build structure. But overall, I think the main reason is because I certainly don't want our future as a continent to remain the same. I'm not suggesting for a moment that I am the Messiah. What I am suggesting is that I cannot be tired when I have to make a contribution. I can't say, oh, I'm too tired, because there's so much to be done. So I've got to make a contribution to the best of my abilities all the time, and because we don't have the luxury of time.
Yeah.
We have lost already almost 70 years.
And before you give us your final message to the continent, have you held a leadership role prior to diplomacy? Did you have any leadership role back in South Africa or student leadership days?
I did. I was the president of student government at university, at Rhodes University, and I was very, very active in student politics. So I understood what I was getting into. Of course, it is continental scale, but politics is politics, whether it's continental or local.
Regardless of the grade.
Regardless. So I knew exactly what I was getting into. Those actually were very, very important learning steps in student government leadership, because you learn to develop discipline, you learn to multitask, manage your academic as well as your student political life. You learn to manage budget, manage expectations, and more importantly, you have to lead. And so it was a very interesting learning experience.
Did you take it to the national level at some point?
I didn't take it to the national level because I wanted to...
Haven't done any protest anywhere?
Well, I mean, we were always protesting in South Africa in one way or the other against the... because I grew up under apartheid, against the apartheid government. So we were always, in one form or the other, in a protest mode. And then when we got to university, you have to channel that spirit of protest through a structure, and that is student government, and not be a rebel without a cause, and be channel the spirit of revolutionarism through a specific special purpose vehicle to see the results that you want to see. It's not unlike what we are doing now. What we are doing now is quite revolutionary, but we are doing it in a structured and in a structured way, and we are channeling it in a structured way. Changing our continent requires a revolution, and a revolution is not necessarily armed struggle. It's not necessarily war. It is a commitment to a fundamental change. And that's what we're continuing to do, that spirit of revolutionarism.
Your Excellency, finally, you've got the entire continent's economic future on your shoulders. What would you tell us?
We are in the right track. We have made significant progress over the last 5 years. I go back to the point I made earlier, and that is that we have made very good progress because our heads of states are hands-on and are driving this ambitious agenda. And so I would say to Africans that take advantage of the AfCFTA, take advantage of the expanded market. We as a Secretariat are here to support you as informal traders, smallholder farmers, SMEs. Our job is to make sure that you succeed in reaching new markets, and we have to work together, private sector and public sector, ministries of trade and the AfCFTA Secretariat, to make sure that we realize our ambition.
We appreciate the time, and we wish you good luck, as we always say, and we pray with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.